We're starting a new book. We're going to start the book of Joshua. And before we get into it, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the book of Joshua, because I think that we need to kind of start with some ground rules. There's a danger when reading Joshua that we might look at the direction and the commands that God gives Joshua and think, well, gosh, that seems a little harsh. We must think, continually and ask ourselves, are we more loving than God is? Are we more patient than God is? Are we wiser than God? And people that don't know him would look at the book of Joshua and think, absolutely, I know what's right and I know what's wrong, and what he did was not fair. And they have no real information about what was going on. God does not need to provide context for all of his judgments. He doesn't need to prove anything to me. God is ultimately just. Every time he decides that something is going to happen, I kind of have to be good with it. Because I trust him, because I have faith that he is loving and that he is good, and if it's something that negatively, every possible option has been exhausted. God does not need a writ of habeas corpus when coming into court. A writ of habeas corpus is used to bring a prisoner or other detainee before the court to determine if the person's imprisonment or detention is lawful. God doesn't need that. You guys are all probably fairly familiar with a lot of the court drama shows and a lot of the terminology that's thrown around, and you can imagine, standing before the Lord and him bringing up something that you said, where, just in the confines of you and one other person. He said, well, when did you say this? Well, how did you know I said that? Wait, how did you discover that evidence? Wait a minute. You found that unlawfully. You can't use that against me. Well, of course God can. He was there. He was a witness of it himself. And so that is the way that we need to approach the book of Joshua, with the fact that this is information given to us. And this is all that's given to us. All the stuff that came before this, God knows. And God exhausted all options. The people of Canaan were horrible. And he had given them plenty of opportunity to turn. So we ask ourselves, who is this Joshua guy anyway? He was the son of Nun, which is all kinds of fun to play with, but it's not N-O-N-E, it's N-U-N, and not the kind that wears a habit. That's the guy's name. He was the son of Nun. In the New Testament, he would be Joshua bar none. But that would, again, all kinds of fun there. Nun was a Jew from the tribe of Ephraim. Ephraim was the younger son of Joseph. If you remember, Joseph had two sons, and they got the blessing. Instead of Joseph getting the blessing, his two sons got the blessing. And in Genesis 46, Jacob, or Israel as he was called at the time, laid his right hand on Ephraim and gave the greater blessing. And when Joseph tried to correct his father, telling him he had mixed up the two, Israel said in verse 19, says, I know, my son, I know, he shall also become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brothers shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. Now, if you know anything about those blessings, they always had the firstborn always got a greater blessing than the rest. And this time, Israel blessed the younger son. So Joshua was from the tribe of Ephraim. Joshua was born to Nun, right? Born to Nun during the captivity in Egypt. And when he was born, his name before he was Joshua was Hoshua, and that means salvation. And you can imagine people that are living in slavery naming their children after the desires of their own hearts. I want salvation. I want to be out of this misery, this slavery, this horrible. I'm going to name my son. Hopefully he'll be the one. I'm going to name him Salvation. The name change was documented when the spies went into Canaan for the first time in Numbers chapter 13, verse 8. It says, and this is just a short little thing, it says, from the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, the son of Nun, talking about Joshua going in as one of the spies. And then Moses writes in Joshua, writes about him in just a couple verses down in 16. These are the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua, changed his name. Joshua means Yeshua is salvation. Okay, and so we change from just generic, plain old salvation to it's Yeshua that is salvation. In the next chapter, when 10 of their companions give a negative report, you see, actually, if you guys open up your Bibles, turn to Numbers chapter 14. And then if you have one of those little, those cool little bookmarky things in your Bible, just kind of leave it there because we're going to be back and forth in Numbers for a little bit. So Numbers chapter 14, verses 6 through 10 says, but Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephthah, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes, and they spoke to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, the land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of this land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. And all the congregation said to stone them with stones. Now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. So you can imagine 12 guys go out, 10 guys come back, and they say, oh, yeah, there's crazy good stuff in there, but man, they're giants. They're scary people. They're strong. They're mighty. Their fortresses are really stout. You know, and Joshua and Caleb, the only ones that come back with faith going, you know what, but God is our God. He's in charge of things, and with him we can do it. Yes, it's awesome. Yeah, they're scary, but who are they compared to God? And when the people started to follow the 10 other ones, these guys got really upset, and they really poured out their hearts, to the point where the people were so fearful and angry that they were getting chastised by these young guys that they wanted to stone them. Fear gets in the way of God's will in our lives. Have you ever noticed that? Joshua fought the Amalekites in Exodus 11, and Moses chose him to lead the battle, as Aaron and this other guy named Hur held up the hands of Moses, and then Joshua won the battle. You guys can read about that in Exodus chapter 17. But in Deuteronomy chapter 34, Moses dies on Mount Nebo, and not before God shows him the promised land. And then all of Israel mourns for 30 days. But in Deuteronomy 34, verse 9, it says, now Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him. So the children of Israel heeded him and did as the Lord commanded Moses. And that brings us to Joshua chapter 1. So it's kind of a little bit of a long one, so we're going to just jump into it and take it a little bit at a time. So you still have your little bookmark in Numbers, right? Because we're going to get back there in a few minutes. But Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 and 2 says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise and go over this Jordan, you and all the people, to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. So up until this point, Joshua had been Moses' assistant, and he had witnessed some pretty amazing things. You could call him a protege. He was up on the mountain. He wasn't with Moses, but he was up on the mountain when Moses was given the 10 Commandments. He saw the thunderings and lightnings, and he waited for him. He saw those stone tablets broken when Moses came down the mountain and saw the rebellion of Israel. He saw the parting of the Red Sea and the drowning of the Egyptian army. He saw the daily provisions of manna and quail. He saw water come from a rock twice. He fought and won battles, and he had gone into the promised land to see what had awaited them. Now Joshua saw the heart of Moses when the people were so scared that they wanted to stone him and Caleb when they gave a good report and challenged the people to trust the Lord. Now this is where, go back to Numbers again, and we'll pick it up in Numbers 13 through 20. It says, and Moses said to the Lord, this is after God has told Moses, I'm done with these people. I'll just start a new people with you. And Moses said to the Lord, the Egyptians will hear of it, for by your might you brought these people up out from among them. And they will tell it to the inhabitants of this land that have heard that you, the Lord, are among these people, that you, Lord, are seen face to face, and your cloud stands above them, and you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Now, if you kill these people as one man, then the nations which have heard of your fame will speak, saying, because the Lord was not able to bring these people to a land which he swore to give them, therefore he killed them in the wilderness. And now I pray, let the power of my Lord be great, just as you have spoken, saying, the Lord is long-suffering and abundant in mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression. But he by no means clears the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation. Pardon the iniquity of these people, I pray, according to the greatness of your mercy, just as you have forgiven this people from Egypt even until now. And then the Lord said, I have pardoned according to your word. That's an amazing intercession there for the people that drove Moses crazy most of the time. Joshua saw this. He saw this, and he was a younger guy. He's not super young, but he's young enough to be like, hey, these guys were just about ready to stone me for standing for what's right. And Moses just, beseeched the Lord to give them mercy. I don't think that I would be as charitable if I were Joshua, or Moses for that fact, when these people were ready to throw stones because they didn't want to trust in the promise. But Joshua had been raised in the Lord by Moses, and he would need every lesson that he had learned to lead these people to their new home. He learned what it was to be a servant first before he was a general. Aristotle noted that he who has never learned to obey can never be a great commander. And that simple little phrase is so true. When you get into the workforce and you get somebody who's over you that does not have the respect of the people in that are below them, it's because probably they've never done the job or they've forgotten how. The best leaders are the ones that are promoted from within, because they've been there and they've done the hard stuff, they won the respect of their people. Verse 3 says, every place, this is back in Joshua, verse 3, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, as I said to Moses. So the whole land was given, but they could only possess that which they claimed. They would have to fight for all of it. And you notice the interesting verbiage here. He says, he's not saying that I will give you whatever your foot treads on. It says, whatever you tread on, I've already given to you. That's God being proactive there. He's on top of things. We've talked before about the economy of God, and there's no waste of effort and no mismanaged opportunity in the kingdom of God. When we look at the cleansing of the land, we can tend to think that wiping out an entire people is kind of a drastic thing. But you know what? God has the market cornered on being long-suffering. You know, and God made a covenant with Abraham. And in Genesis 15:13 through 16, he said this. Then he said to Abraham, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them for 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterwards they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. The word for generations there, it means revolutions of time or ages. It's not necessarily, you know, great-great-grandfather type stuff, because that would definitely span more than 400 years. The iniquity of the Amorites. You know, there's a list of the sins of the Amorites, and it's in Leviticus 18. And the list starts in verse 6 and goes to verses 23. And I really don't want to read all of those. You can read them on your own if you want to be disgusted with these people, the way that God is. But the first 14 verses deal with radical sexual sin within the families. And I just want to say that no combination is left undealt with and unmentioned. But if you look at Leviticus 18, verse 21, it's interesting. It says, and you shall not let any of your descendants pass through the fire to Molech, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Molech was a god that the children of these people were sacrificed to. And it was a practice that haunted the children of Israel for hundreds of years afterwards. They would get too close to a different people group. They would bring in worship of their gods. And before you know it, they're doing Molech worship again. And you know, when sex is part of the worship of your God and has no real significant value in your culture, the byproduct of that is a bunch of unwanted children. And that's just the reality of it. And you know what? That sounds awful familiar in our day as well. You know, and I think that there's so many common things there that, you know, if God is not ready to judge our country for our stance on those things, it's said that he would have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. But Moloch is a bronze or iron statue, most likely with the head of a bull, hands outstretched over an open fire. The babies would be placed into the hands of the idol and basically cooked on the hands of this false god. And then we go down to Leviticus 18:22 through 23. Another issue with these Amorites. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination. Nor shall you mate with any animal to defile yourself with it. Nor shall any woman stand before an animal to mate with it. It is perversion. I don't know how many other ways you can look at that and make it mean anything it doesn't mean. Interestingly enough, people try, and I was made aware of a different translation of the Bible called the Queen James Version. That it's legit. It really is. Published in 2012. You can buy one on Amazon if you want to, but it is designed to deal with and cover any misunderstood statements about homosexuality. And so it does some interesting things with this verse and basically says that it's only in the presence of Molech that's a perversion and abomination. It's pretty interesting stuff. I don't recommend it. Verses 24 through 25 says, "Do not defile yourselves with any of these things, for by all these the nations are defiled, which I am casting out before you. For the land is defiled, therefore I visit the punishment of its iniquity upon it, and the land vomits out its inhabitants." You know, the phrase that I believe that, you know, people are basically good. You know, I'm not going to have a show of hands. But it is a philosophy that you will hear people talk about. And in my professional experience, I don't think you'll ever find anybody who's ever worked in law enforcement that will agree with you. You know, people are not basically good. People can be good, you know, and you know they're good when they're following what God tells them to do. But even the best of intentions outside of God's will or outside of a relationship with God always seems to have a little something in there for them. You know, whether it's notoriety, whether it's a tax write-off, something in there, you know, and when you look at this nation here, left to itself for 400 years, this is what people become. We do have in our country societal rules that punish the guilty and demand restitution be paid to the victim. And it's far from perfect, but it's still the best thing going. You know, imagine a country with no societal boundaries. People feeling free to do any abominable thing that comes into their head, nothing to hold them back from the most heinous and perverted desire. You know, where the life of a child is worth less than the promise of a bountiful harvest. You know, a society where children and grandchildren are used by their own family members and strangers for whatever desire that they happen to have. These are the people that God is judging. After 400 years of patience with them, wanting them to turn, God is finally done. The second reason God uses the children of Israel to extinguish or to take care of the Amorites, instead of simply speaking them out of existence, because he could, absolutely could, is because Israel, up until this point, had a real obedience issue. They weren't really good at it, especially when it was hard. You know, it's like they obeyed, like, you know, when they want food, well, God puts it on the ground. Well, okay, fine. We'll go out and get it. We won't like it, but we'll go out and get it. And every time God told them to do something, they would whine and complain and go to Moses and drive him crazy. And these guys needed some lessons in obedience. You know, God had told Abraham this would happen and that his descendants would cleanse the land. And the children of Israel failed so many times in the wilderness. In this new conquest, we have to see them obey and prosper and then disobey and fail. They have to have, it's like when you're dealing with your children, you have to have the obedience of a child met with, you know, a reward or some kind, and disobedience met with some kind of punishment. So they kind of equate the two. Good things happen when I listen to mom. Bad things happen when I don't. You know, that's what we're basically going back to here with the children of Israel. And they will get plenty of opportunities to do that. Verses back to Joshua 4 through 6. It says, "From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land from the Hittites and to the great sea towards the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage, for this people you shall divide as an inheritance of the land, which I swore to their fathers to give them." So Joshua has been given 3 basic commands here so far. In verse 2, he said, you're going to cross the Jordan River. Verses 3 through 4 says, you're going to defeat the enemies. And then in verse 6, you're going to divide up the land between the people. And it's interesting to notice that Joshua never asked God how. How do you want me to do this? Give me the information. Give me the plan. God didn't offer any kind of a hint about what he was up to. He just said, this is what you're going to go do. Be ready. Too often when God gives us marching orders, we camp waiting for the details. God's people should live on promises, not explanations. If God had told you to do something and you're waiting for all the information before you start, you're taking away opportunities to exercise faith. Trusting God builds the relationship between you and he. So, what if Noah had told God, well, I don't understand what you're talking about, God. I've never seen rain. Can you show me what that is? If you show me what rain is, then I'll go ahead and start building the ark. And that wasn't Noah's attitude. Noah's like, I have no idea what rain is, but I know who God is, so I guess I'm going to start building an ark, whatever that is. That's an awesome amount of faith when you think about it. It seems silly to me that I would expect God to show a sign of good faith before I'm ready to act on what he told me to do. Well, God, I think you want me to do this, but, if you really want me to do this, then I'm going to need some things from you. Kind of ridiculous. Instead, he tells Joshua to be strong and of good courage. So I kind of want you guys to chew on something real quick. Do you know God well enough to trust him? If God gave you clear direction that he wants you to move to Baltimore to help plant a church, don't worry about your job. I have one waiting for you. You'll find out when you get there. Don't worry about a place to stay. I have one picked out for you. It'll be ready. I just need to have you put your house on the market, put in your 2 weeks notice on the 25th, and be ready to go on March 1st. Could you deal with that? Do you trust him enough to deal with that? That's some crazy faith right there. But can God do anything? It's a lot of people would require more information. Well, exactly what kind of job are we talking about? Are we moving into an apartment? Are we moving into a house? How are we going to get there, God? What if my house doesn't sell? He's already planned all this stuff. He's got everything prepared. Do you trust him? And that is what we need to, as believers, get to with our faith. You need to be able to trust him. Joshua had no more information than cross, fight, and divide. The details will be provided to you when you need them. And Joshua was good for that. Verse 7 says, only be strong and be very courageous, that you may observe and do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. So Joshua is called to boldness as a leader. Remember, this is the same people that wanted to stone him the first time he went in, and now he's called to be their leader and their general. Basically, these were instructions on how to lead God's people and represent God well. Unfortunately, we tend to use worldly standards to judge prosperity, don't we? And God's standard for prosperity and the world's standard for prosperity could not be farther apart from one another. I don't have to tell you how the world judges success. You see it every day on social media, on commercials, on TV shows, on movies, on talk shows. They have all these famous rich people that come and explain how wonderful their life is, and it's amazing. Oh, yes, I just got this house, in Italy, and we're going to be vacationing there, and all these wonderful possessions and things that will ultimately burn, but their lives are absolutely empty, and you hear about them being so miserable that they finally decide to end it all, even though they have it all, they think. God's prosperity does not wither, does not die, does not get old, does not break down. It's true. Spiritual prosperity has nothing to do with having a brand new boat or how many degrees you have or whether you're chairman of the board. It's how close you follow him. You got to play the long game here. I'm not much of an investor. In fact, I never even thought about that until I got a job where they actually offered to have like matching, investments in different things, and I'm like, okay, well that's kind of cool. I just, I was part of the whole mayonnaise jar in the backyard kind of investment. You couldn't actually lose that, and you have options when you start investing. You want to play it safe. Do you want to go with a lower return but a safer, less risk, or do you want to go high risk, high return, and depending on your age and where you are in your career, you will get advice to do one or the other, and advice from guys who say they know what you should do. And so that's your first clue that you shouldn't trust them. But this is playing the long game. This is playing the safe game. The prosperity that God has for you can't go away, can't be taken away, can't be devalued. None of that stuff. Verse 9 says, have I not commanded you, be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. That's a promise that we can grab a hold of as believers. If you're following him and you're in his will, you can't lose. Especially if you keep it in mind how God figures that whole prosperity thing. If you're following him, even though the world may say that you're losing, even though you may lose some physical possessions, you may lose friends, you may lose family, ultimately you're not losing. Verses 10 through 11 says, Then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, Pass through the camp and command the people, saying, Prepare provisions for yourself. For within 3 days you will cross over the Jordan to go in to possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess. I don't know about you, but the waiting is the most difficult part for me. I am a naturally impatient person. I used to love watching videos on YouTube of guys that would be working on a lathe. You ever seen these videos? These guys are making like a wooden goblet on a lathe, and I would sit there and I'm like, this is amazing. I love it. It's beautiful. And you get to the point, you get about 3 or 4 minutes into the video, and you're like, man, that looks awesome. Why is there 15 more minutes left of this video? He's already done. Well, he's not done. He's got way more patience than I do. With me, it's just like putting together models when I was a kid, directions. I know what a plane looks like. I know where the propeller goes. I know what the wings are, where the wings are supposed to be. I'll just glue them suckers on and I'm done. The same thing with doing woodwork. It's like it was one of those things where it was an exercise in patience. I don't really have much. And when God has got something in front of you, wanting you to do, and you know it, and he just says, you know what, just wait for the time. It's coming. Like, come on, God. I want to get going. I want to get doing it. I feel like I'm just spinning my wheels. But like we said earlier, God's economy is perfect. It's never late. It's never lacking. Always, always, always perfect. What he's doing here is he's preparing, he's using the people that has been appointed previously. Deuteronomy 1:15, Moses did this to help get his leadership. Everybody was coming to Moses for everything. And the people of Israel just got bigger and bigger, and he couldn't do it anymore, so he appointed people. It says, so I took the leading men of your tribes, wise and respected men, and appointed them to have authority over you as commanders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and as tribal officials. This is just smart. This is smart leadership. This is the way that you manage your military. You can't be the end-all, be-all when you're leading around 1 million people in the desert, because disputes are going to arise. People are going to have questions. People are going to think they know better. You appoint people that are smart and that are committed to be leaders. I'm going to get into this interesting thing in verse 12 through 15. It says, "And the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joseph spoke, saying, Remember the word which Moses your servant, the Lord commanded you, saying, The Lord your God is giving you rest and giving you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in the land which Moses gave you on this side of the Jordan, but you shall pass before your brethren armed, all of your mighty men of valor, and help them, until the Lord has given your brethren rest, as he's given you. And they also have taken possession of the land which the Lord your God is giving them. You shall return to the land of your possession and enjoy it, which Moses, the Lord's servant, gave you on this side of the Jordan, towards the sunrise." And this is a story that goes back to Numbers chapter 32, when the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh came to Moses and asked, "You know what, we really like it here, Moses. We'll just go ahead and take our inheritance here. We raise cattle, we raise livestock, good grazing ground over on this side, and we'll just stop right here." And when you read it, Moses gets pretty irritated because it seems to him like these guys are just willing to bow out and not, go into the land and help with what needs to be done. And so Moses talks to these guys and makes a deal. You can stay here, but you're still going in to fight with the other tribes. These guys are reminding Joshua of the deal, and that they would cross over and fight until the nation was established. And this was a concession that Moses made with these tribes. It wasn't meant to be that way. And ultimately, they were going to pay for it in different ways, because they were going to be less connected to the rest of the group because they're farther away. They're going to be the farthest away from the place where they're commanded to go and worship. When God makes a concession with you, rest assured, you are no longer in the perfect will of God. You have entered the permissive will of God, which is not nearly as good as the perfect will of God. God will let you go, but you will be missing out on the blessings that God has intended for you. So don't do that. Verses 16 through 18. "So they answered Joshua, saying, All that you command us, we will do, and whatever you send us, we will go. Just as we heeded Moses in all things, so we will heed you. Only the Lord your God be with you, and as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your command and does not heed your word, and all that you command him shall be put to death. Only be strong and of good courage." So they spoke about this. It's not just the tribes on the east side that are saying this. This is all of them saying, you're basically giving Joshua their support. This is them saying, whatever you tell us to do, we're going to do. We're going to treat you just like we treated Moses. Which probably, if I were Joshua and they said that to me, I'd be going, great. I know how you treated Moses, but they assured him that they would follow and that they would obey. We have some interesting promises here, and you know what? They're going to be put to the test later on in this book. In the coming weeks, we're going to see some victories and some failures and battles fought with angels and treachery, the sun standing still during a battle, and developing cities of refuge as they come into the land that God has promised. Joshua has a rich history of God working in the lives of people and basically tuning them up so that they'll follow. When I was going through this and studying this out, there's a lot of people that, with alphabets behind their names, that like to criticize the book of Joshua as it's a violent, bloody mess. I'm like, well, yeah, but it's not pointless. It's very purposeful. And again, like I said at the beginning, it says you have to trust that God knows better than you. And that's one of those things that you develop that through knowing him. And the only way you can do that is by reading his word and talking to him, letting him prove his love to you. Prove all those things that he says is true. So as we go through this book, we're gonna be hitting a lot of crazy stuff. Pretty excited about it. So we'll just kind of leave it right there and get you guys out of here. Let's go ahead and pray. Dear Lord Jesus, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for these folks. Lord, sometimes bad examples can speak louder than good examples. And these guys complaining in the wilderness, refusing to go into the land to take possession of what you had for them, is a great negative example of how to what not to do. Lord, we need to trust you when you tell us to move. We need to have the faith that Joshua had when all you told him was, go cross the river, attack the enemy, and be ready to divide the land. Okay, God, you said it, it's got to happen. Lord, give us that kind of faith, to trust that you have our best interest at heart, and ultimately, Lord, you're going to take care of us, and we're going to see you face to face. Lord, we just give you the rest of our morning, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.